We're live on Facebook now.
Good afternoon in Mexico City and good morning in New Zealand. We are starting our panel number 7, Women in Leadership, in this first international colloquium of Mexican and New Zealand studies, Trans-Pacific encounters between the past and the multipolar world, an academic dialogue. For this panel, I'm pleased to introduce Farah Palmer, who will be presenting Women's Leadership in New Zealand, a Maori woman's perspective. And afterwards, Dr. Fernanda Vidal will be presenting the topic Women in Leadership, Women in Congress, Expectation about Representation. So let me share with you the bio of Farah Palmer. As captain of New Zealand Black Ferns rugby team, Farah Palmer led the team to victory in 3 consecutive World Cups and had the honor of wearing the black jersey 35 times. In 2005, she was awarded International Women's Personality of the Year by the International Rugby Board. In 2014, was one of 6 women inducted into the IRB Hall of Fame. Since retiring from rugby as a player in 2006, Farah combined her experience of sport and tertiary education with her desire to bring about social and cultural change to organizations, especially for Maori and women. Farah became the first woman to be appointed to the New Zealand Rugby Board in 2016 and joined the Sport New Zealand Board in 2018. She's also the chair of the New Zealand Board in 2018, starting a new role as Associate Dean Maori for the Massey Business School. Farah has used her spheres of influence as a woman proud of her Maori heritage, an academic and sports person to challenge dominant ideologies and discourses related to Maori, women, leadership, sport, and business. We are very honored to have her participation here today. Please let's hear her.
Could you please stop screen sharing for a second, please? Because we need to put the audio first. So I'm going to transmit the audio of Professor Farah.
Yeah. Tinga mana I ngā reo, I ngā rangirua tēnā. Tahi kia koutou, mai nei tēnei wā. Ko waiho, ko whāraranga ko aonga hau, ko waikato, iwi, e noho ana ahau ki papai oia nai nei. Reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā. Kia ora and welcome to you all. We've gathered for this very special occasion, and it's lovely that the environment can come together and share and ideas. My name is Farah Palmer, and I come from a tribes here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And I have been living in Hamilton in the Maori too. So I'm going to share a little bit with you today about my perspective of what it means to be a Māori woman, leadership and skills. So I'm just going to share the screen with you. So as I said, I am from what Dean, and I'm also a rugby, maybe familiar with, and responsible for leading negotiation play areas. I'm also a Te Aho Tāmaka leader here in the Vanuatu, which is something that the Central Development Agency has established in the last years. So I can help speak to the wide range of groups. So I wanted to talk about the power of shared and in Maori, these stories are referred to art, object, visual displays, and even sayings and idioms. So they all tell, and these create.
Bueno, sorry for the technical difficulties. The sound was very, very bad. So I'm going to try and follow Farah, her beautiful presentation. I may not know the stories that she's trying to share with you, and I'm very sorry about that, but I'll do my best. So Farah, as she was saying, was the leader of the Black Ferns, the national rugby team in several World Cups. She's a member of the board of the New Zealand Rugby and Sports New Zealand. Not an easy achievement for a woman in a sort of male-dominated context. Also, Associate Dean, Maori, Massey Business School, and Te Aho Tāmaka leader, Central Economic Development Agency.
Voy a trabajar casi para la noche de hexatlón.
Here she's showing the power of shared stories, Puracao. Stories told through various mediums are the deep architecture of culture. They demonstrate fundamental patterns of thinking and acting, and thus provide leaders with critical criteria to navigate by. And she's showing a painting or a picture of Maui pulling up Teika Maui, sort of the hero or one of the heroes. An entrepreneur, a leader, manager, strategist, and trickster. See, Maui. The next one. Mm-hmm. What stories do we tell of Maori women? Hinetititama. She provides the text in Te Reo, and I cannot translate, unfortunately. Stories of Maori women as leaders. So she must refer to myths or stories in Maori culture where women are depicted as leaders. Stories of haka and women's rugby in Aotearoa, New Zealand. That's an article by Palmer. Weaving identities and ideologies together. Black ferns performing haka. Haka, you may know of, is a traditional ceremony. It's a war ceremony that is used to be performed by Maori in war context, but it has been taken up by the New Zealand male rugby team, and they perform it before their matches. And here you have the Black Ferns, the girls performing haka. Very powerful dance. Mm-hmm. Here, Farah seems to be sharing with you leadership styles specific to Maori culture. The rangatira or chief, the cacique would be in Spanish, chiefly austere, supremely confident, directive, autocratic. Faya, mother, facilitator, quietly in control, outwardly strong, maternal, malleable, guiding and nurturing from behind. Tuakana, firstborn, senior lineage, stoic, giving direction to juniors while seeking conformance with peers. Teina, younger sibling, leader, junior lineage, outspoken, risk taker, can be constrained but generally leads through friends. Potiki, youngest, outspoken and daring, leads by force of personality, sometimes indulged. Tohunga, specialist, leads through expertise, is analytical, aesthetic, and idealistic, displaying confidence in certain parameters. Wahinetoa, the warrior leader, outwardly strong, inwardly directed, leading by example. So it seems that they're mostly constructed around the context of the whānau, the family. This is Moana from the Walt Disney movie. I'm not sure what she wanted to share with you about Moana. She seems to be the rebellious type of leader. Knowing where you come from, and she has pictures maybe of her family, of her lineage. Her iwi, the tribe. Yes, that's her iwi. Nati Maniapoto, Nati Wayora, Mokauko, Huniunui. Waikato is the region, Central North Island. Nati Mahuta, Te Koraha. So she's showing her family, her lineage. Knowing where you are, where you stand, my organizational context so far. So rugby, that's her life as a sportswoman. Massey, the university, where she's a teacher in the business school, and Sports New Zealand, where she's a leader. And the next one. Knowing what waka or kaupapa you're on. Waka is the boat, so the vessel, and they use waka is in many words that relate to vehicles, so it's what takes you. So the journeys she's on. Being aware of and ready for the storms and obstacles you will face. And so she's, mentioning rugby, a man's game, that's the question, where she's shown as a rugby player being a woman. And then she provides some statistics about the amount of Maori students that get to postgraduate qualifications. Very few. So she's tracing the trajectory of Maori students. Being aware of and ready for the opportunities and signs of sustenance. So the many awards she has received, her public life, being a leader as a sportswoman and Maori. Navigate by your values and principles. So these must be hers. I'll read them aloud. Get the job done, resilience, optimism, responsibility, duty, fairness, equity, determination, Manakitanga, kindness. Pautamatanga, achievement. Taumatatanga, excellence, respect. Kotahitanga, unity, collaboration. Know what future destination you seek. And she has a picture of Sir Mason Dury. All Maori thriving as Maori, flourishing whanau, the family, forward-looking and globally connected, iwi and hapu, the tribe, strong and vibrant te reo Maori, tikanga and marae, so the culture, te reo is the language, the Maori language, a booming Maori economy, a regenerated natural environment. So that these are the goals, right? The destination. Rebalance constitutional arrangements in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And Sir Mason Dury as an icon, a Maori icon to follow. Puna, managing and leading organizations from a Maori perspective. Mana is authority, prestige, and for the Maori, it's a very highly regarded value to have mana, that inner authority, which does not have to do with external hierarchies. It's earned. You have it. And so she provides a sort of a dynamic diagram, practices as the drop that feeds off genealogy, authority, force, spirituality. And you have the words in te reo. Wairua, hau, Maori, mana. Whakapapa, I think Leonel had mentioned this before, or Philip, the genealogy, the layers that come before you. Everyone and everything has whakapapa. This idea of the cycle is very present in Maori culture, that we belong to a sort of a spiral. It's the symbol of the koru, the beginning of the fern, as the fern leaf opens up. So this idea of life, nature, people connected to each other and to nature and to our four people. So our history, right? Wairua, spirituality, intuition, sense of conviction, higher purpose, animating what you do. I am sorry we cannot hear the stories. We can see some Muslim girls playing rugby, most surely here in New Zealand. Mana, this is what I was telling you about before, authority and prestige, potential of others, group and individuals. So I'm not sure, but maybe she was talking about this, trying to realize others through your mana. So nourish others. I participated in a project that was put together by FARA to nourish young leaders from secondary schools. So maybe she was referring to this. Maori, life force, act with tika, pono, aroha. Aroha is love. See? Handing over Taiaha to Rotorua Council before a Maori All Blacks game. Student support staff. Maori All Blacks present a jersey in memory of former Munster coach. So this energy. How exchange of breath. That's the way traditional Maoris salute. So sharing breath, sharing air. You see Farah doing that? Which means I share with you, well, the life force, no? Reciprocity and partnership. We can go through these. Farah said, you can go skip this one. I don't know if there's another one. She's talking about the business school at Massey. The next one. Is that the last one? I'm so sorry I cannot do justice to the tereo, to the Maori language. I'll read it in English. Forever hold fast. Flight formation of the kawau. And that's the waka. See? The vessel. I'm sorry you were not able to listen to Farah herself, but I can just comment on this, on her key role as a woman and a Maori woman in New Zealand's public landscape. Mm-hmm.
Lina, thank you very much for your effort and sharing the Farah's ideas with us. Let's proceed to Fernanda Vidal's presentation. Let me share with you some data about her bio. PhD in Political Science from the Politics Department of the University of Sheffield. Master in Scientific Research Methodologies from the same department. Member of the National System of Researchers, Level 1. She is a professor researcher at the Universidad Panamericana, Campus Mexico. Research Secretary of the School of the Political Studies Association, as well as the International Political Science Association, the Mexican Political Science Association, the Midwest Political Science Association, the Southern Political Science Association, and the Latin American Studies Association. Deputy member of the United Nations High Panel for the Economic Empowerment of Women. She is the author of various works, including her book, Women in Mexican Politics, a study of representation in a renewal, federal, and democratic state. Likewise, articles have been published in international indexed journals, including Federalism and Gender Quotas in Mexico, Analysis of Nomination of Owner and Alternatives, Understanding Equality in Mexico, Women in Politics, among others. Her line of research includes contemporary transformation of the state, international prospects, and political social studies with a gender perspective. Thank you very much, Dr. Fernanda. She will be sharing with us Women in Leadership, Women in Congress, Expectation about Representation. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I wish to thank Professor Hiron for inviting me and for being able to present some of the work I've been conducted regarding legislative studies and the study of the Mexican Congress. And what I'm going to present today is related to how women have been able to take the floor, how they have been able to get into Congress, but not only as representatives, how they have managed to move into certain positions within the leadership of Congress. But with this, I intend also to question if this has led to a better representation of women's interest in women's rights in Congress, specifically in the Mexican Chamber of Deputies. So let me share with you the presentation that I prepared for today. Do let me know if you can see it. I think it's cool. Okay, so are women leading Congress? And if in doing so, how well or not? Women's interests are being represented. It is always the belief that once women get into Congress, once they are elected, and they surpass a certain level of representation, meaning a number of women in office, this would or could automatically translate into a better representation of women's rights. So with the project I'm conducting right now, what we question is if this transition does occur and how it does, if more women being present in Congress has actually translated into a better representation of women. And one of the parts of this research leads into how women in leadership positions may try to foster or to promote the representation of women's rights, and how it is possible for women in leadership positions
to better represent women than women or men who are not in leadership positions within Congress. So what we know so far is that in Mexico, the significant increase of the number of women in the lower house has indeed affected how the Congress itself has organized. And this allows us to study leadership, especially if women in leadership have managed to advance or not the women's legislative agenda. So this is a figure where I can show you how women have been able to get into the Chamber of Deputies. We have data coming from early beginning of the 21st century to 2018. 2018 meaning the most recent composition of the Chamber of Deputies. All elected deputies right now were elected in 2018, and they are going to get into another election this year. So this data is the most current data available on how the Chamber of Deputies is distributed between men and women. So as you can see, more women are being elected. Since 2015, we have here in Mexico, through a legal reform that was made to our constitution and secondary laws, we have a mandate that requires political parties to nominate women to half of the available positions. So we are reaching parity. And even in the Chamber of Deputies, the distribution is yet to be equal, like 50-50. We already have seen these, for example, in the Senate. So with this new composition, when we have already reached this parity, at least in terms of the number of women that are being elected, then we need to question if now that women are equally positioned, as at least in numbers, as men within Congress, they have been able to get into other positions that are really important within Congress itself. Because if we think about the Mexican Congress, as in many other presidential systems, many of the decisions that are taken within Congress are made by commissions. And within commissions, debates take place, and within commissions, decisions are being made before they reach the floor, and everyone votes on either approve or to reject a certain bill. So that is why it's so important for women to be leading commissions and also to be present in other congressional leadership positions. So as we can see with this, between 2012 and 2015, women were not actually getting into office as well as they began doing so in 2015. By 2015, women were leading 32.7% of the commissions within Congress. There were 52 commissions at a time, and women were leading 32.7 of those. By 2018, and with these new laws on parity and women reaching in more numbers seats in Congress, women also began chairing more commissions. But the interesting thing is that not only women are leading more commissions or are part of the congressional leadership positions, it is that these commissions are not only now related to traditional gender roles. We are seeing women leading commissions such as government, finance, and public credit. We have seen women leading commissions in justice, constitutional matters, public security, for example, civil protection and prevention of disasters. Before 2018, women were basically leading commissions related to human rights, gender. They were leading commissions on for children, for example, social security, education. Those commissions were seen as traditional or associated to traditional gender roles. But now women are moving into different commissions and reaching certain positions within Congress that reflect the empowerment of women in Congress. But has this translated into a better representation of women? Has this translated into women's rights being represented in Congress? Has this translated into bills that are targeting women's rights being approved, being voted for. So sadly, what I can say is that even if women are heading important commissions now in Congress and they are members of congressional leaderships, women's rights are not necessarily well represented. What we can see through evidence of old bills that have been drafted and bills specifically on women's rights, evidence suggests that a change in deputies' legislative work and the chamber legislative agenda itself has moved towards a better representation of women, but this has not been done because women are leading positions in Congress or because women are leading commissions in Congress. Substantive representation, that is how well representation is conducted regardless of the numbers, is led mostly by women without any previous legislative experience or without any leading position. This means, for example, that if we understand representation as in the number of bills sponsored and in the subjects that are targeted or where policy consequences are likely to have a more immediate and direct impact on large number of women than men, if we understand representation of women's interest in such a way, we can then say that regardless of the number of bills that are sponsored by female legislators on women's issues, the increase of female legislators has just indeed shown a positive association with the number of bills on women's issues, but, and this is really important, women in leadership positions are not sponsoring a gender legislative agenda. And that is really significant because what we are seeing now is that women with less experience, with a number of reduced political capital because of the less experience they have, because they have not seniority within parties, those are the ones that are pushing or advancing the gender agenda in Congress. So we can see that both female and male legislators in leadership positions within Congress are less engaged with the legislative gender agenda. In this figure, we can see how many bills on women's issues were sponsored between 2015 and 2018, 311, and between 2018 and so far 2021, 386. But if you can see, female legislators in leadership positions are today just moving ahead a pretty small amount of those bills, meaning that the legislative agenda on gender issues is mostly advanced by female legislators that don't know how Congress might proceed or how Congress conducts work itself, or that because they have no seniority within their party, they are not able to use a significant amount of political capital that is needed to actually get things done and to actually transform bills into actual laws. So this could be affecting, yes, the female legislators' political capital, but this could also be affecting how women's bills are being approved and the amount of bills that have been approved over the past years. So as you can see, bills on women's rights, according to the length of service, women with less than 3 years of service are the ones that are promoting or sponsoring bills, while women with 10, 12, 15, even 17 or more years of experience as previous legislators, they are not interested in the gender agenda. So as conclusions, female in legislators in leadership positions are increasing. Yes, we are seeing more women heading important commissions, heading congressional leadership positions, whips, and so on. Both are important, but if women's issues are not important for women in leadership positions, and if the legislative gender agenda is almost entirely carried on by inexperienced female legislators, this could likely be affecting the number of bills that are being that are reaching the floor and that are being discussed by everyone, and that at the end are voted by the plenary. So, for example, in the 53 Congress that was between 2015 and 2018, of the 311 bills on women's issues, only 13 were approved. While today, Congress has already debated or has sponsored 386 bills on women's rights, but they have only approved 12. So maybe if we have more women in leadership positions advancing bills that target women, then we can maybe say that women in leadership positions with enough political capital will be able to carry on these to the last stages of legislative work, meaning bills being translated into actual laws that afterwards can translate into action, into public policy. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Fernanda, for sharing with us this very interesting presentation. And let's move on to the Q&A session. So while we collect the questions from the social media, I do have some questions for you. The first of all is that one of the topics that we usually discuss in these gender issues is the topic about the privilege, about what is the background of these women, who are their families, and how did they get to the power. If we see, I'm not talking about specifically legislative women who are in the legislative power, but women in power in general speaking. If you see the head of state that have been women, they usually come from families that have been already in the power for several decades. So I would like to know your impression about these women that at the beginning start to arrive to the Congress. Were they coming also from privilege? And then the second part of my question is about these new women that you are saying that have not so much experience, but then they get to the Congress and then they are able to make changes. Where do they come from, Fernanda, please?
Okay, so I would say that before 2010, many women reaching office and reaching elected positions, even as governors or municipal presidents, they did usually come from families that were already invested in politics. And you can see the names, you can see the last names, and then you will recognize basically where they come from. But now, because we need more women, and because legally political parties are mandated to have 50% of all nominations filled with women, women are coming from everywhere, basically all backgrounds. And what political parties are trying to do is they're trying to recruit women that already have a significant position within their own community, regardless if that position is a position of political power. It can be women leading their own communities in terms of environment or telecommunications. Women in radio, for example, are recruited by political parties to become candidates. So we are not longer seeing those women coming from already established political families. We're seeing women with different backgrounds coming and being elected. Now, the thing with women with less experience is that, and it's not only related to women, it's for both men and women reaching office with no experience, is that there is there is some time for them. They will have to take time to understand how Congress works and how you introduce a bill, for example, and how it has to be approved by a commission, and then how it has to move to the floor. But before you get this things done, you have to discuss it within the party itself, and the party has to approve it. And so the less experienced legislator it is probably that they are going to have more trouble with overcoming whatever barriers or processes that the Congress itself has to approve or to get things done. So it is not a thing related to gender, but we can see that there are more women with less experience than men. So that's when it gets gendered.
Thank you very much, Fernanda. We already have some questions. The first question is from Celina Bortolotto from Massey University. She asks, I have a question for Fernanda. Do women in power in Mexico have to adopt their femininity to appear as a strong leader, take on more masculine attributes?
Should I answer directly, one on one? Okay, good. Okay, so I would say that younger women, because I have conducted interviews for the past 15 years with different women at different levels. We have state congresses and we have the federal congress. So I would say that younger women are feminine. They don't need to hide that in order to feel powerful. They don't have to behave as men in order to appear powerful. But I would say that women that already have 15, 20 or more years of experience, that have been in government for the past 30 or 40 years, they did usually have to do that. And when I had interviewed them, they have accepted that at first they needed to look strong, they needed to have to look like the so-called Iron Lady, right? In order to get into an already male-dominated atmosphere. But this is not longer the case. Women tend to behave differently according to their own personalities. It is more a thing about trying to move decisions into spaces where everyone can be part of or belong, because many decisions are being taken in spaces outside Congress or Congress offices. I would say that what they want now is that decisions are taken in spaces where they can be invited to, and that's the most important part of how politics is now conducted in Mexico.
Seems to be good news that they're changing the leadership roles. Then we have one question from Professor Leonel Alvarado, also from Massey University. He's asking, how about indigenous women? How much access do they have to political representation at local, state, or federal level?
Yeah, that's where we find a problem now. I would say that we have laws that protect women who are indigenous women. And the law states that regardless of indigenous beliefs, traditions, or decision-making process, they cannot restrain or impede women to get into office. But that's what's written in the law. But what we actually see, institutions are trying, political institutions and electoral institutions are trying to restrain, is how many indigenous populations, many indigenous communities are not allowing women to take office. They manage to get elected, but then they cannot take office. Why? Because the entire community is not letting them get into the actual buildings, for example, to be sworn to office. So even though empowered women are being elected, getting into leadership positions and so on, right now, the most serious problem in terms of women's representation, I would say, has to do with how the entire electoral and political system is not working to protect indigenous women's rights to not be elected, but to being sworn into office and to actually be able to do the job for which they were elected.
Continue with this last question. Will you say it's because of they are women, or because they come from indigenous original people?
It's because they are women. It's not because they're indigenous. But the thing is that it is the same indigenous communities from where they come from that are not allowing them to take office. It's not the rest of the people that do not recognize themselves as indigenous people. It is the same indigenous communities that do not recognize women's rights to have political roles and political lives.
Isn't it, sorry, isn't a racial problem or a class problem?
I would say it's a total gender problem, because it is not that I'm discriminating against someone that it's indigenous. It's me, that I'm an indigenous male figure within a community, prohibiting an indigenous woman of being sworn to office because she's a woman, and women do not have anything to do with politics, at least in the perspective of those male indigenous leaders within communities.
Thank you, Fernanda. As a last question, we have been studying the gender gap report at UEA and make some comparisons in the Pacific economy. As you know, well, this colloquium is about New Zealand and Mexico, and one comparison that we can find about these countries in the Pacific is that there are some gaps that have been closed regarding, for instance, educational gaps, even some of the economical gaps. But one of the gaps that is very wide yet is this gap, the political gap. We don't see a lot of women representing their communities or their societies. So you already told us some of the reasons, and we can understand for what you are saying is that it depends on the kind of women, and it depends also the kind of representation. But will you have like a general explanation of why are these gaps in the political sphere so wide yet?
I would like to make a comment only because as Vania was telling about the global gender gap, I was just seeing during the last months a gender gap between Japanese women and Mexican women. And in the first report that it was in 2006, we were more or less the same between Japan and Mexico in the global gender gap report. But in the last report, in the 2020, Mexico is in the 25th, and Japanese, it's more or less 121. It is incredible because, and that's the way that sometimes we have to see what's in the back of these statistics. And the problem is that in Mexico, we have a lot of women, more women in the parliament, as you have said, Fernanda. But in Japan, we don't have that. And the problem is that when you compare even education gap, the salary gap, and the other gaps, well, the Japanese women are better than the Mexican women. But because we are having a lot of places in the political parties, that's why we are over Japan. So I think we must see very carefully these things, because what I have seen is that Mexicans, I don't know if you will agree with me in a conclusion that Mexican women in the parties are being used by the parties, and they are not doing anything for the gender issues, and also they don't have a feminist perspective. I don't know if you will agree with me in that conclusion, in that phrase.
Yes, in the case of the Global Gender Gap Index, there are different things that are assessed in order to construct the index: economic participation opportunity, educational attainment, health and survival, and political empowerment. And because Mexico is so well assessed in political empowerment, it can create a bias in terms of where Mexico is positioned according to the Global Gender Gap Index. Because in terms of education attainment and health we are not as in many other countries, like in Japan, as you mentioned, Alicia. So in that sense, I would take the Global Gender Gap Index. I would try to see actually how it values each part in order to see how and why it values political participation too much, and it doesn't take into consideration as much the other things like education and economic opportunities. Having said that, in terms of women in Mexico and women in political parties in Mexico, I do think that both men and women do not have any kind of feminist, I would say, even education, not even perspective, but education, because they are not educated in terms of how the feminist paradigms may change or redirect the legislative agenda. Is that even if more women are being elected, that doesn't mean that women are better represented. And I wouldn't say that political parties are controlling women because they are controlling men and women, but because political parties don't care about a gender agenda, we are not going to see female and male legislators of those parties pushing or really addressing a gender agenda. They are just using kind of cover-ups in order to say that, oh yes, we are promoting women, right? But they are not actually making changes that are going to impact the quality of life for women in Mexico.
Okay, thank you.
Fernanda, thank you very much for this interesting presentation and the following up discussion. Hopefully for the second colloquium, we can discuss about Jacinda's leadership. It will be very interesting to learn her journey to the power in New Zealand. So we have to close this panel. Thank you so much for being here with us today and answer all of our questions. So let's make a small pause for the next panel.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.